Welcome back to Better Avec Bourbon. Today we'll be taking a closer look at a few members of Jim Beam's whiskeys, cask strength, single barrel, and small batch lineup, reviewing the nose and taste of familiar brands like Jim Beam itself, and some of their more premium selections like Booker's small batch. But let's go through the full lineup, shall we? Starting off, we have the Jim Beam single barrel. It comes in at 108 proof and 54% ABV, and has a mash bill of 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley. It's a rye bourbon, so it will have some spice, but it's going to be on the sweeter side with all that corn. And it's typically aged 6 to 8 years for added smoothness. Jim Beam is distilled by James B. Beam Distilling Co. in Claremont, Kentucky, and is owned by Suntory Global Spirits. Next, we have the Maker's Mark cask strength. It comes in at 111 proof and 55% ABV, and has a mash bill of 70% corn, 16% soft winter wheat, and 14% malted barley. It's considered a wheated bourbon, and might be the sweetest of the bunch since there's no rye in the blend, and corn, wheat, and barley tend to be on the sweet scale. Maker's Mark is aged 6 to 7 years, and is known for being quite smooth and quite accessible compared to Buffalo Trace's wheated bourbons, such as Weller's Antique or Special Reserve. It's made in the Maker's Mark Distillery in Loretto, Kentucky, and is also owned by Suntory Global Spirits. Next we have Knob Creek 9 Single Barrel. It comes in at 120 proof and 60% ABV, and has a mash bill of 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley, and it's aged 9 years, the oldest of the bunch. It's a rye bourbon, so it'll have some spice, but with 75% corn, it's still going to lean sweet. If you haven't figured it out, Jim Beam's bourbons, similar to Buffalo Trace, tend to be on the sweeter side. Knob Creek is distilled by James B. Beam Distilling Co. in Claremont, Kentucky, and is owned by Suntory Global Spirits. And lastly, Booker's Small Batch. It's 124.4 proof and 66.7% ABV, and has a mash bill of 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley. So in terms of mash bill, it's identical to both Jim Beam and Knob Creek, with Maker's Mark being the odd one out. It's going to be a bit spicy with the proof, and it's going to be a bit hot on the palate even with 75% corn. This is an international release of the Springfield batch, the 2024-1. The Booker's 2024-1E has been aged for 7 years, 1 month and 12 days, compared to the Springfield that sits at 7 years, 7 months and 8 days. Booker's is distilled by James B. Beam Distilling Co. in Claremont, Kentucky, and is owned by Suntory Global Spirits. Now that we have our lineup, gather your Glencairns, your whiskeys, and let's get to it. Before diving in, let's try to demystify the difference between cask strength, single barrel, and small batch. Cask strength in its name implies that this is unfiltered whiskey straight from the barrel. However, it can more so be understood to mean it hasn't been fully diluted down to 40 to 45%, and instead, like Maker's Mark, tends to rest in that 55 to 60% range. For undiluted whiskey, you want still strength whiskey, which comes out at the 70% range. But to say the quiet part out loud, cask strength only refers to the amount of dilution. There's nothing to limit how many distilleries or barrels may be involved in one whiskey, or if it's blended before or after aging. Single barrel, as it implies, is aged and bottled from one barrel instead of being a traditional blend, which means it could be different from bottle to bottle and year to year, which is why people are still able to talk about the latest release of, say, George T. Stagg and have something new to say. And lastly, small batch bourbon is a blend of single barrels to create a unique blend. Another important thing to keep in mind is the placement of the barrel in the rickhouse and the location of the rickhouse, as the climate the barrels are in is going to determine how it's aged, which is why for more coveted bottles they make a clear distinction about where the barrels are coming from. A rickhouse is a 7-story high building made of wood, brick, stone, or metal, where barrels are stacked 3 high on wooden shelves, which are called ricks, which is where the name rickhouses comes from. These rickhouses are filled with several rows of barrels stacked 3 high on ricks. So although Jim Beam, Knob Creek, and Booker's have identical mash bills, the barrels used and their location in the rickhouses are different, which will give you unique flavor, composition, and proof. But enough about the science, let's get to the bourbon. Starting off, we have the Jim Beam single barrel. Get your Glencairn and pour an ounce or so. It's priced at Total Wine for $32.99 with 108 proof, 54% ABV, and has a mash bill of 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley. Let's give it a swirl. According to Jim Beam, for aroma we should expect rich oaky vanilla with light spiciness. Let's give it a sniff. I get generous cherry, some oaky smoky, with some classic vanilla and caramel. Moving on to Maker's Mark Cask Strength, grab another Glencairn and pour an ounce or so. The widest part is a 2-ounce pour for context. It's priced at Total Wine for $45.99 with 111 proof and 55.5% ABV, and has a mash bill of 70% corn, 16% soft winter wheat, and 14% malted barley. If you want a deeper dive into Maker's Mark's lineup, click here. Maker says for aroma we should get big oak, vanilla, and caramel. For nose I get green apple, oak, and vanilla. Next, Knob Creek 9 Single Barrel. Get your Glencairn and pour an ounce or so. It's priced at Total Wine for $51.99 with 120 proof, 60% ABV, and has a mash bill of 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley. Let's give it a swirl. For aroma, they say robust vanilla, caramel notes, and slightly smoky. For the nose, I get salted roasted nuts, oak, and vanilla. This nuttiness is a common theme for many Knob Creek drinkers. And lastly, Booker's Small Batch. Get your Glencairn and pour an ounce or so. Priced at Total Wine for $99.99 with 124.4 proof and 66.7% ABV, and has a mash bill of 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley. Give it a swirl. For aroma, they say robust vanilla and caramel notes, slightly smoky. So identical to the Knob Creek 9 Single Barrel on paper, but for the nose I get salted roasted nuts, oak, some vanilla, but more smoothed out and background to the salted peanuts thing happening. Aroma is one thing, but how do they taste? Starting from left to right, Jim Beam says the single barrel's taste, we should get well-balanced attributes of oak, vanilla, and caramel. For my taste, I get strong oak, little vanilla, slightly fruity in the background, but very oak forward. Next, Maker's Mark says for the cask strength taste, a robust, warm texture with notes of caramel, vanilla, and spice, and a long finish on the front of the tongue. Harmonious with no harsh bitterness. For my taste, I get exactly how it smells and in that order. Green apple, oak, and vanilla. Quite smooth compared to Jim Beam, which is known for being approachable, even with the slightly higher proof. Next, Knob Creek says for the 9-year single barrel's taste, deep and complex flavors of vanilla, nuts, and oak, with a long and full finish. For my taste, I get salted roasted nuts, oak, and vanilla. Very much reminds me of the peanut casing taste, not too strong, still oaky with a hint of vanilla. It also has a very pleasant full finish, not too harsh. And lastly, Booker's. Booker says for the Springfield Small Batch, which is most comparable to the International, which is what we have here, we should get deep and complex flavors of vanilla, nuts and oak with a long and full finish. Perfect for easygoing sipping. Either their copywriter can't be bothered, or whoever tasted this needs to get their olfactory senses tested, because for taste I get Knob Creek but on blast, with a longer mouthfeel. So maybe once they're diluted down, which is typically how they collect the tasting notes, the Knob Creek 9 and Booker's Small Batch are the same, but for me the Booker's has more peaks and valleys and definitely a longer finish, likely eye-watering for some. So we've tasted them all, but how do they compare? In last place I have the Jim Beam Single Barrel. It's good, but it's a bit generic. I also started my bourbon journey with Jim Beam's White Label, so there is a comfort in it. And it's one of the more approachable whiskeys to start your bourbon journey. Second last, I have the Knob Creek 9 Single Barrel. Of what I have here, it's probably my most purchased, but ultimately it's a more balanced version of the Booker's, which makes it great to keep in your lineup, especially as for me, it's even costed better than the Maker's Mark Cask Strength. $70 Canadian versus $100 for the Maker's Mark. So third in a tasting, but first in my heart. For the top slot, it's quite close as both of these bourbons offer something completely different. For Maker's Mark, you get an incredibly approachable whiskey, which makes really smooth old fashions, and is gentle even when drinking neat. And for Booker's, it's really exciting, and for those who like it, they really like it. The salted peanut flavor is really unique compared to other bourbons, especially at this proof, and even the bottle and the packaging is next level. But if I had to choose between the two, I'd go Maker's Mark Cask Strength. Booker's is just a bit expensive for what it offers, which makes it a bottle reserved for tastings, lowering its utility. Whereas the Maker's Mark is a crowd pleaser, it's good neat, it's great in an old-fashioned, and it's my wife's favorite of the lot. Now that I've got 4 Glencairns of bourbon to get through, I'm going to go where no man has gone before, making a Mega Beam old-fashioned. Get a mixing glass, a shot glass, or a beaker that can hold at least 4 ounces, and pour in each of your Glencairns worth of bourbon. I've got about 2.5 ounces here, so I'll be scaling up all the ingredients roughly 20%. So 2.5 ounces of a bourbon into your glass. Five dashes of Angostura bitters. 1/3 of an ounce of Demerara syrup. And a scoopful of ice. Stir for 20 seconds. Then grab a rocks glass, add a big cube, and carefully strain your cocktail in. And then garnish with an orange peel. Now for a sip. It's really good and unsurprisingly very bold given the proof of these bourbons. It leans into more of a spicy direction, given that's where the majority of the mash bills are, but it's balanced by the Demerara syrup and the roughly 75% corn across the board. It's worth blending more bourbons to find your idyllic old fashioned, but if you try this one, cancel your evening plans. Thanks everyone for watching. Do you have a favorite Jim Beam bourbon? Or do you have another distillery you think I should explore? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, hit that like button, press subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.